The billionaire dreamed of his new secretary and sent her a photo. Her reply left him speechless. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The soft hum of city life filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Royce Tower penthouse as Ethan Royce jolted awake at 3:07 a.m., heart thudding like he had sprinted a mile. His silk sheets were tangled around his waist, his breathing uneven, and one name hovered in his mind like a whisper he wasn't supposed to hear: Anna. Anna Cole, his brand-new secretary. The woman who barely said more than "Good morning, sir," yet somehow lingered in his thoughts long after office hours. He scrubbed a hand across his face, trying to laugh at himself. Billionaires weren't supposed to have stupid dreams, especially not about their employees. He swung his legs over the bed, walked toward the dim glow of his phone on the nightstand, and before he realized what he was doing, he snapped a picture of himself, hair messed from sleep, shirt half unbuttoned from falling asleep at his laptop, and eyes still dazed from the dream. It wasn't inappropriate, but it wasn't exactly CO approved either. He meant to delete it. Instead, his thumb hit send, straight to Anna. For 2 full seconds, he froze. Then panic hit him like cold water. No. He stared at the screen, horrified, imagining HR reports, lawsuits, headlines. He typed an apology, erased it, typed another, erased that too. Nothing sounded right. What was she going to think? Meanwhile, across town in her tiny studio apartment barely bigger than his walk-in closet, Anna Cole jolted upright as her old phone buzzed against the nightstand. She blinked at the screen, confused. Why would her boss text her at 3 a.m.? When she opened the image, her heart nearly launched out of her chest. Ethan Royce, billionaire tech mogul, her intimidatingly handsome boss, looking rumpled, exhausted, and unbelievably human. For a split second, she wondered if he'd sent it by mistake, or worse, if she was being tested. Her job mattered. She needed that paycheck to survive, to pay off the loans stacked on her kitchen counter like unpaid dreams. She inhaled sharply, fingers trembling as she typed out a reply. Ethan's phone lit up almost instantly. He swallowed hard, dreading the worst, expecting professionalism or panic or a resignation letter. Instead, the message read, "Sir, are you okay? Should I call someone?" He stared at it, speechless. Of all the responses he braced for, he hadn't expected kindness. Not fear. Not judgment. Just pure concern. Something in his chest tightened. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was relief. Or maybe it was the realization that Anna Cole was nothing like the calculated social climbers he'd spent his adult life dodging. Before he could respond, she sent another message. If this was meant for someone else, don't worry. I didn't see anything. But she had. She'd seen the exhaustion he tried to hide behind tailored suits and billion-dollar decisions. She had seen him, the real him, and still offered him a way out. Ethan exhaled, long and shaky, staring at the glow of the city below. For the first time in years, he felt vulnerable. And for reasons he couldn't explain, that terrified him more than the mistake itself. Outside, the night deepened, the world still sleeping, completely unaware that a single accidental photo had just changed everything. The sun had barely begun to rise over the New York skyline when Ethan Royce stepped into the private elevator of Royce Tower, still replaying the night's mistake in his head. The soft chime of the elevator only made his pulse pound harder. He had spent the past 3 hours crafting and deleting a dozen different messages to Anna, each one sounding worse than the last. Nothing felt appropriate. Nothing felt safe. He was a man who could shut down a failing subsidiary in 30 minutes. A man who could negotiate million-dollar contracts before breakfast. Yet right now, he could not figure out how to talk to the one woman who had answered his mistake with compassion instead of fear. When the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, the building was quiet, the city's early lights spilling across the polished concrete like a thin sheet of gold. Ethan paused. Outside his office, saw the dim glow under his secretary's door, and stopped cold. Anna was already here. She always arrived early, but today something in the air felt different. He took a breath and walked in. Anna sat at her small desk, shoulders stiff, hair pulled into a neat bun that could not hide how exhausted she looked. Her planner, the old leather one with worn edges, sat open beside a stack of schedules she had already prepared for him. She looked up when she sensed him. Their eyes met. A heartbeat. Then she quickly stood. "Good morning, sir." Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her. She held the tablet a little too tightly, her knuckles turning pale. Ethan swallowed his nerves and nodded. "Morning, Anna." He wanted to apologize right away, to sweep the air clean before the tension swallowed them both, but the words caught in his throat. She handed him his schedule for the day, avoiding his eyes. "I updated your briefing notes for the Tech and Innovation Council meeting. Your flight for Chicago is confirmed for next Thursday, and you have a call with the European board at 10. He listened, but none of it registered. Because beneath her calm tone, he could hear something else. Distance, caution, maybe even fear. He hated it. He took a step closer. "Anna, about last night. I sent that message by mistake. I should not have." She immediately shook her head, eyes wide. "Sir, you do not need to say anything. I assumed it was accidental. It is completely fine." But it was not fine. She said the words with perfect professionalism, yet her shoulders tensed, and she kept one hand on her planner like she needed something to hold on to. Ethan lowered his voice. "Still, I want you to know I am sorry. It was inappropriate timing. I did not mean to make you uncomfortable." Her expression shifted for a moment, almost softening, then tightening again. "Thank you, sir. But it truly is not a problem." She turned back to her desk, clearly ready to bury both herself and the topic under work. He watched her for a long moment, noticing the dark circles under her eyes, the way she kept rubbing her thumb along the edge of her planner. She had not slept either. Guilt settled heavily in his chest. Ethan cleared his throat. "Anna, if you ever feel uncomfortable or pressured, you can tell me. You are valuable here. I want you to know that." She froze. Not dramatically, just a subtle pause, as if she was not used to being told she mattered. Slowly, she nodded. "Thank you, sir." He should have walked into his office then. Let the day begin. Pretend everything was normal. But something made him linger. Maybe it was the dream. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him in the glow of her phone last night, full of worry instead of judgment. Or maybe it was because, for the first time in years, he cared what someone thought of him beyond boardrooms and investor calls. Before he could find the right words, the main entrance door opened, and his chief operations officer, Mark Ellington, strode in with the energy of a man who never slept. "Ethan, morning. We have a situation with the West Coast Division. The numbers are—" He stopped mid-sentence when he noticed Anna, then smirked. Early start for everyone, I see." Ethan's jaw tightened. He suddenly felt protective, irrationally so. "Mark, go wait in my office. I will be there in a moment." Mark raised an eyebrow, but obeyed. When he disappeared inside, Ethan turned back to Anna. Her cheeks had flushed slightly. "I will start preparing the documents for your call," she murmured. He nodded, but his thoughts were far from business. As he stepped into his office, one truth hit him with startling clarity. Last night had not just been a mistake. It was the beginning of something he did not yet understand, but could no longer ignore. The rest of the morning passed in a strange haze as Ethan moved through meetings and calls, but his attention drifted back to the small desk outside his office every few minutes. Even when he tried to focus on numbers, projections, or Mark's loud voice detailing the West Coast Division problems, the image of Anna's tense shoulders and tired eyes kept pulling at him. By noon, he found himself staring at his office door, listening for the faint sound of her typing. He hated the silence between them, not because she was at fault, but because she was acting like she was, as if she had crossed a line that he had been the one to blur. When his lunch reminder buzzed, he ignored it for a moment, then finally stood and stepped outside. Anna was gathering documents, tucking loose papers into neat stacks with the precision of someone who clung to order whenever her emotions felt chaotic. She did not notice him at first. "Anna," he said softly. She looked up, startled. "Yes, sir." "Have you eaten?" She blinked, clearly thrown off by the question. "I have some granola bars in my bag. I will be fine." It was such a small answer, one she delivered without hesitation, as if surviving on granola bars was normal. Ethan frowned. "Come with me." Her eyes widened. "Sir." "To lunch," he clarified. "You worked through your morning break. I need to discuss the Chicago itinerary anyway." That part was a lie, but a harmless one. After a long pause, she nodded and followed him into the private elevator. The ride down was quiet, filled with the soft hum of machinery and the subtle scent of her shampoo, something light and clean. When they reached the in-building restaurant reserved for executives, she hesitated at the entrance. He noticed. "Is everything all right?" She forced a small smile. "I have never been here before." Ethan exhaled gently. "Then today is a first." He held the door for her, and she stepped inside. The dining room was sleek and modern, all warm wood and soft light. As they sat, Ethan noticed her trying to shrink into herself, as if afraid to take up space. He decided to change that. "Order anything you want," he said. "Do not worry about the price." She looked down at the menu, which was large enough to double as a briefcase. "I promise I am not picky. A salad is enough." "Anna," he said, his tone gentler than he intended, "I did not bring you here to watch you pretend you are not hungry." Her eyes flicked up, startled again, but this time something softer flickered beneath the surface. Gratitude, maybe, or confusion. The waiter arrived, and while Ethan gave his usual order, Anna hesitated before finally letting herself choose a real meal. When the waiter left, she set her hands in her lap. "Sir, I appreciate this. Truly. But I do not want you to feel responsible for me." "I do not," he said. "I just came to fix a mistake." She froze, then looked away. "Last night." He nodded. "You did nothing wrong. You reacted with professionalism and kindness. I was the one who acted impulsively." "You were tired," she said quietly, almost defending him. "Everyone makes mistakes." He leaned back, studying her. "Not everyone responds to them the way you did. You could have been angry, or uncomfortable. Instead, you checked if I was all right." Color rose in her cheeks, and she looked down at her water glass. "I just thought, maybe you needed help." He had no idea why those words hit him the way they did, but they lodged somewhere deep, in a place he had ignored for years. Before he could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and a worried crease formed between her brows. Ethan saw her grip tighten around the device. "Is everything all right?" he asked. She hesitated. "It is nothing. Just a reminder about the rent." Something in her voice cracked, so faint he almost missed it. She immediately tried to cover it with a smile, but it did not reach her eyes. Ethan sat still, absorbing that, filing it in the part of his mind that did not forget things. As they finished lunch and walked back toward the elevator, he noticed the small tear on the strap of her bag, the one she tried to hide with her hand. He noticed everything now, and when the elevator closed, sealing them in a quiet silver box, an unexpected thought hit him. This woman lived every day carrying burdens she never let anyone see. And for the first time since he had built his empire, Ethan Royce wished he could take some of that weight off her shoulders. That afternoon, Ethan tried to bury himself in work, but his focus kept drifting back to the way Anna had looked in the elevator after lunch, standing perfectly still with her hands clasped in front of her, as if she were afraid to break the calm around them. Something about her softness, her quiet resilience, kept tugging at him long after he returned to his office. By mid-afternoon, the sky outside had turned a soft, muted gray, the kind that made the city hum in a lower, slower rhythm. Ethan stepped out of his office with a folder in hand, pretending he needed Anna's input when, in truth, he simply needed to see her again. She was bent over. Her planner, writing in neat, meticulous letters. The old leather cover lay flat on her desk, its edges softened by years of use. He had seen a lot of planners in his life, but none treated with that level of care, almost reverence. "Anna," he said. She straightened quickly. "Yes, sir." "Walk with me." That startled Blink again. He was beginning to recognize it, the small hesitation she had before adjusting to anything unexpected. Still, she rose from her chair and followed him down the hall. The two of them walked through the glass corridor that overlooked the city. From this height, everything below looked small, distant, almost peaceful. Anna kept her gaze ahead, her hands linked tightly in front of her. "I wanted to talk about your workload," Ethan said. "Is everything manageable?" She inhaled quietly. "Yes, sir. I can handle it." He gave her a look. "That is not what I asked." She hesitated for a long moment before admitting, "It can be overwhelming sometimes, but I am managing. I always do." That last part sounded practiced, like a phrase she told herself often. "You do not have to carry everything alone," he said. "If something is too much, I expect you to tell me." She nodded, but he could feel she did not believe she had that freedom. They turned the corner, passing a display of framed company milestones. Anna slowed slightly, her eyes catching on one photograph of a much younger Ethan shaking hands with investors during the company's early years. Her voice softened. "You built all of this," she said. "From the ground up." "With a lot of mistakes along the way," Ethan replied. "And a lot of people who taught me things I did not know I needed to learn." She seemed to absorb that, her gaze drifting back to the city outside as if she were thinking about her own road, her own struggle. They reached a private conference room, quiet and warm with soft lighting. Ethan stepped inside, expecting her to follow, but she remained at the doorway. "Sir," she said gently, "if this is about earlier, I do not want you to feel obligated to check on me." He turned to her. "I am not obligated." She froze. Her fingers curled around the edge of the doorway. A faint breath escaped her lips, the kind people release when they do not know what to do with the emotions they are suddenly holding. Ethan took a single step closer, not enough to crowd her, but enough that she could feel the sincerity in his presence. "Anna, you do not have to pretend everything is fine just to keep your job." Her eyes flickered up to his, vulnerable in a way he had not seen before. "I have been on my own for a long time," she said quietly. "Being fine is the only option." For a moment, neither of them moved. The world outside the room felt far away, replaced by a silence that hummed with something gentle, something new. Then the spell broke when Anna straightened her shoulders and forced a small smile. "But I appreciate your concern, sir. Truly." She stepped inside the room, ready to return to professionalism, ready to bury her feelings again, but Ethan could not ignore the heaviness that clung to her. As they reviewed documents, he kept catching small details. The way her fingers tapped the table whenever she felt anxious, the way she kept adjusting the torn strap of her bag, the way she paused for just a second longer than necessary before writing notes. She was holding herself together with threads. When the meeting ended, she gathered her belongings quickly, almost too quickly, as if afraid she had lingered too long in his presence. "I will update the files and send them to you before the end of the day," she said. "Thank you, Anna." She nodded and left the room. Ethan stayed behind for a long moment, staring at the empty chair she had occupied. Something had shifted between them today, something subtle but undeniable. Her walls were not just made of professionalism, they were made of survival. And as the door closed behind her, Ethan found himself thinking one thought with quiet, unsettling certainty. He wanted to understand her, not as an employee, but as a person whose strength deserved to be seen, not hidden. The rain began in the late afternoon, tapping gently against the tall windows of Royce Tower as the city faded into a watercolor blur. The executive floor grew quieter as employees headed home, their footsteps echoing down the hall before disappearing into the elevator. By 6 o'clock, only 2 people remained on the floor, Ethan in his office, and Anna at her desk, typing steadily as if the storm outside had no power over her. Ethan watched her through the open doorway, noticing the soft glow of her desk lamp highlighting the curve of her cheek, the faint shadows under her eyes, and the focused way she leaned forward each time she read something carefully. She was still working on the files that he had promised could wait, but she treated deadlines like lifelines, holding on tightly because she had no safety net underneath her. After another hour passed, Ethan finally stood and stepped out of his office. "Anna," he said gently. She startled, not dramatically, but with a small jump as if she had been too deep in concentration to notice him approaching. "Yes, sir." "It is late," he said. "You should go home." She glanced at the clock and seemed surprised by the time. "I will, sir. I just need a few more minutes." He noticed the exhaustion she tried to hide behind that automatic professionalism. "You have done enough for today. It can wait until tomorrow." She hesitated, her fingers still resting on the keyboard. "Tomorrow's workload is already heavy. I do not want to fall behind." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Anna, go home." She closed the laptop obediently, but he could sense she was anxious. As she gathered her things, the worn strap of her bag finally gave out with a soft, tearing sound. The bag sagged dangerously, nearly spilling its contents. Anna froze, embarrassment flashing across her face. "I am so sorry, sir. I did not mean—" "Anna," he interrupted, "you do not need to apologize for a broken bag." She quickly knelt down to gather the items that had slipped out. A couple of pens, a small stack of unpaid bills folded neatly together, a key, a cheap umbrella missing a cap on one of the metal tips, and her old planner. Ethan saw how carefully she scooped up the planner as if it were something precious, something more than paper. When she stood, she held the bag against her side in a way that hid its damage. "I will fix it tonight," she murmured. "It only needs a little stitching." Ethan's brows tightened. He wanted to tell her she did not need to fix a $10 bag or pretend she was fine, but he knew she would only smile politely and refuse help. Instead, he said, "Let me walk you out." She shook her head quickly. "Sir, you do not have to do that." "I know," he replied, "but I want to." Her eyes flickered with that same startled look he was beginning to recognize, but she did not argue. They walked quietly down the corridor, their footsteps echoing softly through the dim hall. When the elevator doors closed, sealing them inside the warm golden light, Ethan noticed the way she clutched her broken bag against her chest like a shield. She stared ahead, but he could see her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. "How long have you lived in your apartment?" he asked gently. She blinked, caught off guard. "Almost 2 years," she said. "It is small, but it is manageable." Something about the word manageable bothered him more than it should have. It was the same word she used earlier to describe her overwhelming workload. Manageable was not the same as comfortable. Manageable was surviving, not living. When the elevator reached the lobby, a cold gust of wind swept inside as the doors opened to the main entrance. The rain had grown heavier, falling in sheets against the glass. Anna pulled out her broken umbrella. One of the metal arms sagged awkwardly, bent like a tired limb. Ethan took one look at it and gently removed it from her hand. "This will not help you," he said. She tried to protest. "Sir, it is fine. It still works." "It does not," he said firmly, but without harshness. "Come here." He guided her under the large building awning as the doorman rushed forward with a company umbrella, the sturdy black kind used for executives. Ethan handed it to her. "Take this." She shook her head again. "I cannot. It is for staff. I will return it tomorrow." He held her gaze. "I know you will." She finally accepted it with both hands, her expression softening with something that looked like gratitude mixed with confusion. "Thank you, sir. Get home safely, Anna." She nodded, stepping into the rain. For a long moment, Ethan watched her walk down the sidewalk, the large umbrella shielding her from the storm, her small frame disappearing into the night. As she turned the corner, he felt an unfamiliar ache settle in his chest. She had walked into his company as a secretary. But somehow, without meaning to, she had walked into his life as something far more significant. And Ethan Royce, a man who prided himself on being untouchable, realized that he was no longer standing in the distance. He was standing at the edge of something he had never felt before. The next morning arrived with a pale silver sky, the kind that made the city look softer than usual, as if it had been washed clean by the night storm. Ethan stepped into the executive elevator with a quiet sense of anticipation he pretended not to notice. He told himself it was just another workday, another morning full of meetings and decisions. Yet there was a restless energy in him that had nothing to do with business. When the elevator doors opened, he immediately saw her. Anna was already at her desk, her hair still slightly damp from the rain, her clothes neatly pressed, and the company umbrella folded carefully beside her chair. Her broken bag was nowhere in sight, replaced with a much older canvas one that looked like it had lived a dozen lives before reaching her shoulder. She looked up when she heard his footsteps. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. "Good morning, Anna," he replied, and something warm flickered in his chest at the way her voice settled the tension inside him. It struck him again how composed she always tried to be, how she hid the weight she carried as if afraid someone might notice she struggled. "I returned the umbrella to the front desk," she added. "Thank you again." "Of course," he said. "I am glad it helped." She gave a small nod and turned back to her work, but he could see the subtle exhaustion in the way her shoulders lifted as she breathed. "Come to my office when you have a minute," he said. "Yes, sir." It was 15 minutes before she stepped inside, holding her planner against her chest like armor. He gestured for her to sit, and she lowered herself into the chair with careful posture. Ethan watched her for a moment, trying to decide how to begin. "How was the storm last night?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "It was manageable," she said. He raised an eyebrow, and she caught herself. "I mean, it was loud, but I got home safely." Good, he said. That is what matters. A small silence settled between them, the kind filled with unspoken truths. Then, he leaned forward slightly. Anna, I meant what I said yesterday. If something is too much, you can tell me. Her gaze dropped to her planner. I do not want to seem incapable. Caring about your well-being does not make you incapable. Her breath caught, only noticeable because of the soft rise of her shoulders. She opened her planner, perhaps out of habit, and a small paper slipped loose, landing on the edge of his desk. Ethan glanced at it. It was a sketch, a rough pencil drawing of a modest studio space with a soft-lit desk, shelves lined with planners, calendars pinned to walls, and a hand-lettered sign that said Coal Time Management. Anna reached for it quickly, cheeks flushing. I am sorry, sir. That was not meant to be here. Ethan gently placed a hand over the paper before she could take it. Is this yours? She froze. Just an idea, she murmured. A dream. He studied the sketch with genuine curiosity. You want to open a studio? She hesitated. Someday, when I can afford it. It is silly, I know. It is not silly, Ethan said, and his voice held a depth that made her look up. Dreams are not silly, Anna. They are blueprints for who we want to become. She stared at him, surprised by his sincerity. For a moment, something unguarded crossed her face, a mix of hope and fear. You should not feel embarrassed about wanting more, he continued. You deserve more. Her lips parted, but she did not seem to trust her voice enough to speak. Before the moment could deepen, there was a sharp knock on the door. Mark stepped inside without waiting for an answer, holding a folder and wearing his usual impatient expression. Ethan, we need your signature on the Chicago contract. He stopped when he finally noticed Anna. His tone shifted into something too casual. Oh, did not mean to interrupt. Ethan's jaw tightened. Yes, you did, he said calmly. Wait outside. Mark's eyebrows lifted, startled by the firmness in Ethan's voice, but he stepped out. When the door clicked shut, Anna stood abruptly. I should get back to my desk. Anna, thank you for your time, sir, she said quickly, clutching her planner to her chest again. She slipped out before he could finish. Ethan sat back in his chair, staring at the sketch still on his desk. For the second time in 2 days, he felt that quiet ache in his chest. She had dreams she barely allowed herself to believe in, burdens she never allowed herself to show, and walls she had built from years of surviving on her own. And now, without meaning to, he had stepped close enough to see all of it. Close enough that he could no longer pretend he felt nothing. The rest of the day unfolded with a heaviness that neither of them acknowledged out loud, but both carried silently. Ethan tried to focus on reports, projections, and calls from the Chicago office, yet his attention kept drifting back to the sketch still resting on the edge of his desk. Every time he glanced at it, he saw not just lines on paper, but the quiet courage of a woman who dared to dream while living on a thread. Meanwhile, outside his office, Anna worked with a determined steadiness that looked almost like calm, but Ethan recognized it for what it was now. She was retreating behind the safest version of herself, the version that stayed small, silent, and invisible. By late afternoon, a meeting with the executive team began in the glass conference room down the hall. Anna entered a few minutes early to set up the projector, arranging Ethan's notes in perfect order. She moved efficiently, her face composed, but her grip on the papers was tight. Ethan stepped into the room just as she finished placing water bottles at each seat. Mark stood near the window with a smug smile that Ethan already disliked. You do not need to do all that, Mark said to Anna with a casual wave, as if dismissing her effort. Just leave it. Assistants always overdo things when they want to impress. Anna froze, her back straightening, embarrassment flickering across her face. Ethan's tone dropped to something cold. Anna's work is excellent, he said. If you have a concern, address it to me. Mark lifted his hands defensively. Relax, Ethan. It was a joke. It was not funny, Ethan replied. Anna kept her eyes down, quickly stepping aside as the rest of the team filed in. Throughout the meeting, she stood near the wall, taking notes with the same precision as always, but Ethan noticed the way her shoulders curled forward, the way she avoided looking at anyone except the documents in her hands. When the meeting ended, Anna gathered the leftover papers and quietly slipped out before anyone could speak to her. Ethan followed a few minutes later, finding her at her desk, organizing everything with mechanical movements. Anna, he said softly. She looked up, startled. Sir, do you need something? What Mark said earlier was inappropriate. She shook her head immediately. It is fine. I am used to comments like that. The casual way she said it made Ethan's chest tighten. You should not be. She offered a small, weary smile. It does not matter, sir. People say things when they do not think anyone is listening. Ethan stared at her, wanting to tell her that he had been listening, that he had noticed more about her in the past week than she realized. But before he could say anything, her phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at the screen, and a look of quiet dread crossed her features. Ethan saw it, a flash of something raw and frightened before she masked it behind professionalism. She quickly silenced the phone and slipped it into her bag, but not before he caught a glimpse of the notification preview. Past due notice. His voice softened. Anna, is everything all right? She forced a small breath. Just a reminder. It is nothing. But he knew it was not nothing. She was unraveling in small ways she hoped no one saw. The broken bag, the exhaustion, the bills she tried to hide. He watched her close her planner, clutching it with both hands as if grounding herself. I should finish typing the minutes, she whispered. Of course, Ethan said, though the words tasted wrong. As he walked back into his office, he felt a worry settle deep and heavy. Something was happening, something she was carrying alone, and he feared the moment was coming when she would no longer be able to hide it. And for the first time in years, Ethan Royce felt genuinely afraid of what he did not know. That evening, long after most of the staff had gone home, Ethan sat alone in his office with the city lights flickering through the glass walls. He tried to focus on the Chicago presentation, but every time he read a sentence, his mind drifted back to Anna's face when she saw the past due notice on her phone. That quick flash of fear was something he could not forget. Eventually, he pushed back from his desk and stood, unable to sit still any longer. He walked out into the empty hallway and stopped when he saw a small light glowing from Anna's desk. She was still there, shoulders slumped, typing slowly as if each keystroke took effort. Her cardigan hung loosely over her frame, and her older canvas bag sat on the floor beside her, patched in two places with mismatched thread. Anna, he said gently. She startled, her fingers freezing on the keyboard. Sir, I am finishing the meeting minutes. I will be done soon. It can wait until tomorrow, he said. You look exhausted. She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. I promised I would finish today. Ethan stepped closer, noticing the faint tremble in her hands. You do not have to keep breaking yourself to keep your word. She stiffened, then slowly closed the laptop, as if admitting defeat felt like failure. I am fine, she said quietly. Just a lot on my mind. He hesitated, then asked softly, Is it the overdue notice you received earlier? Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked like she wanted to deny everything, hide everything, disappear into professionalism again. But instead, she sank back into her chair and sighed. My rent increased last month, she whispered, and I had some unexpected expenses. I am trying to keep up. She glanced down, embarrassed. I know it is unprofessional to bring personal problems into work. It is human, Ethan said. She looked up, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. Anna, you are carrying more than anyone should alone. Her eyes glistened, though she blinked the tears away before they could fall. I am trying, she murmured. I really am. Ethan's voice softened even more. Let me help. She shook her head immediately. No, sir. That would not be appropriate. I do not want to owe anyone anything. You would not owe me, he said, but she was already standing, clutching her planner to her chest like a shield. Thank you for caring, she whispered. I need to handle this myself. She reached for her bag, but he noticed the way her shoulders curled inward, the way the weight of everything pressed down on her. As she walked toward the elevator, he watched her small frame disappear into the dim hallway, and something inside him twisted. He had offered help, and she had refused, not because she did not need it, but because she did not believe she deserved it. And as the elevator doors closed behind her, Ethan knew one thing with absolute clarity. He was done standing on the sidelines. Whatever storm she was facing, he was going to find a way to pull her out of it, even if she never asked. The next morning, Ethan made a decision before the sun had fully risen. He arrived at the office early, carrying a folder he had prepared the night before. Inside it was a proposal he had drafted himself, not as a CEO commanding an employee, but as a man who wanted to give someone a future she had never allowed herself to imagine. When Anna arrived, she paused at her desk, surprised to see him standing there. "Sir, is everything all right?" He held out the folder. "I want you to read this." She hesitated, then opened it. Her eyes widened as she scanned the first page. It was a full business plan for coal time management, crafted with professional detail, supported by funding, resources, and mentorship. A path toward turning her sketch, her dream, into something real. She looked up at him, speechless. "Why would you do this for me?" He took a slow breath. "Because you have been carrying your dreams in silence. Because you work harder than anyone I know. Because you matter, Anna. More than you realize." Her voice trembled. "I cannot accept this. It is too much." "It is not charity," Ethan said gently. "It is an investment. In someone who deserves it." She covered her mouth with one hand, overwhelmed, and for the first time since he had met her, she let the tears fall freely. He stepped closer, his voice soft. "The night I sent that photo by accident, I thought it would ruin everything. Instead, it showed me something I had forgotten. That kindness still exists. That people like you still exist." She lowered her hand, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan, what are you saying?" He met her eyes, steady and sincere. "I am saying that you changed something in me, and I want to be part of your future, whatever that looks like." She breathed out slowly, a quiet, emotional laugh, escaping her. "You already are." In that moment, surrounded by morning light and the quiet hum of a new day beginning, Ethan realized that the mistake that had started everything had become the one thing he was most grateful for. And as Anna stepped into his arms, he understood the truth he had been trying to ignore. He had not just saved her dream, she had given him one too.